Standard 5-star units like Calcharo, Lingyang, and Encore were strong enough to beat all types of endgame content, including the middle tower of the Tower of Adversity a few months after Wuthering Waves got officially released, but they have been completely overshadowed by new and much more stronger units as the game progressed, which is pretty common in live service games like Wuthering Waves, because buffs granted on difficult floors of endgame content mostly synergize with teams built around new units, and enemies also need to be HP inflated gradually to compensate for the huge damage potential of recent units like Zoni and Cortethia. But why is it even important to buff standard units in the first place, and do they even provide any kind of value to veterans, beginners, and Kuro games from a revenue perspective? Well, buffing standard units can be very important so that beginners don't feel like the game is just a cash grab or forcing you to pull for new limited units just to be able to beat some mid-difficulty endgame content like Whimpering Waste and the left and right side of the Tower of Adversity. This builds consumer trust where players feel like their past investments are respected, and the security makes them more willing to spend on new characters not out of necessity to beat endgame content, but out of genuine support and how much they like a particular character's lore, gameplay, and design. But don't get me wrong though, units like Calcharo and Lingyang are still usable in the current meta, where floor buffs mostly benefit units that utilize negative status effects to do damage. This is evident in speedrun showcases from cracked creators like Moment, Yumi, and Wild Crown. But the skill floor is pretty high in order to compensate for the flaws in the kit design and low damage output of standard DPS units. In other Kuro titles like Punishing Grey Raven, leap skills are a late-game upgrade for older constructs or characters. They don't just boost the character's stats, but add entirely new mechanics, effects, or damage types, giving the character a fresh playstyle or better synergy with even more characters for diverse team building options. A good example is Alyssa Echo's Leap skill, which is considered a decent upgrade over her old playstyle and mechanics. With the Leap skill, she gains access to the glaciation effects, letting her support new elemental comps while still buffing physical teams. She also gains a bonus 5% physical damage boost, and most importantly, her leap unlocks faster rotations, making her one of the most flexible supports in Punishing Grey Raven. It's simply Kuro Games' way of keeping older units relevant in endgame content without constant power creep. Likewise, Kuro could introduce smaller upgrades to standard units in Wuthering Waves to make them just enough to be competitive, giving beginners a reason to keep playing and spend money later on without the game feeling predatory in the future. But if standard units receive no upgrades as the game progresses, endgame content gradually becomes much harder and may require specific units to have a much easier time to clear them, making low spenders in free-to-play at mid-game level of progression where they can level their characters to level 90 feel left out of rewards, because beating endgame content rewards you with Astrite that helps in pulling for new characters. This also ensures that veterans can pull for characters they enjoy playing, with the mindset that they can even beat endgame content with standard units if they wanted to. However, there are potential downsides. Buffing standard units take development resources and time that might otherwise go into new characters and content. Overbuffing standard units could also cannibalize interest in new banners, though many would argue that most players would still chase new releases simply because they are new characters. But still, most industry examples, like the release of new artifact sets in Genshin Impact for old units like Xiao, and leap skills in Punishing Grey Raven, shows that moderate buffs are safe if done correctly. For example, giving a character like Jianxin limited application of arrow erosion can drive sales for a future main damage dealer that depends on arrow erosion to do damage, because players won't have to spend a significant amount of pulls to get Chacona if they don't already have her, in addition to the pulls that they will need to get that particular DPS character. In short, the benefits of player retention and happiness leads to sustained profits and can outweigh the cost of buff implementation for standard units if handled with extreme caution. So let's examine what can be improved for all standard units that we have in the game, and some reasonable fixes that Kuro Games can implement in Wuthering Waves. Calculator. Calcium is notorious for having a high skill floor with a very low payoff. his optimal rotation, which involves the basic attack 2 cancellation to stack his killing intent stacks much faster, is arguably the hardest mechanic in the game, but his Death Messenger's anti-interruption is on par with Zhonya's when casting Nightfall, so as long as you have his damage reduction passive unlocked, and you have a strong healer like Verina, you can safely tank some damage without quick swapping. His base damage is also enough to beat the left and right towers of the Tower of Adversity and can even clear the middle tower if he can benefit from universal buffs that the middle tower provides. So his damage potential is fine for a standard character that you can get multiple copies by losing your 50-50. Possible fixes include the following. Give this man a better way to stack killing intent stacks. The best way that I can think of is being able to get 2 killing intent stacks when he performs a dodge counter while his liberation state is active. This can make casual play less punishing. Increase his resonance liberation state duration uptime. If stacking killing intent stacks with dodge counters is considered extreme for a standard unit per Kuro game standards, increase this man's liberation state duration to about 15 seconds. This will encourage casual players to learn the basic attack 2 cancel tech and feel less punishing at the same time if they try to implement it in-game, because you can at least manage 3 death messengers if you mess up with a 15 seconds duration, but at the cost of losing ultra buffs from sub-DPS buffers like Jianxin for example, if you fail to execute the tech fast enough. Lingyang. Lingyang currently suffers from short helicopter mode or flight mode duration just like Calcharo, but his main issue is his split scaling of basic attack and resonance skill damage, in addition to pretty wonky hitboxes. His liberation cooldown is also 20 seconds, which is pretty high compared to Encore, whose liberation cooldown is 16 seconds, which makes double intro skills with Sound Warp possible within the 30 seconds ultra buff duration of Verina and Shorekeeper. This makes double intro skills from Sound Warp to Lingyang in one rotation nearly impossible, which could have significantly increased his damage per rotation. But otherwise, he's a great unit overall, with less disadvantages compared to Camouflage. He just lacks damage output in general. Possible fixes include: extend his flight mode duration. Increase the duration of Lingyang's flight mode duration from 10 seconds to about 14 seconds when his liberation state is active. This can make him do more damage per flight mode in one rotation. Give him a single type damage scaling. Make Lingyang's resonance skill cast in his flight mode scale off basic attack damage instead of resonance skill damage, so that he can fully take advantage of Sound Warp's basic attack damage amplification. Change his Lion's Pride passive to something much more useful. Instead of 50% intro skill damage scaling increase, buff his basic attack damage scaling by 20%, or his Stormy Kicks, which is this animation right here, which he uses to end his flight mode, by 50%. Rework his sequence 6. Instead of giving him 100% basic attack damage scaling increase, his resonance skill cast or the Mountain Roamer during his flight mode in his liberation state should transform into a glacial bomb with increased scaling that does damage in a wide area of effect, with some added animations like the lion dance pose in his character trailer to show the area of effect. Jianxin. Jianxin suffers from concerto energy regeneration issues because her most important contribution to your team building is her outro skill that amplifies resonance liberation damage, making her a suitable replacement for premium units like Jianxin when building teams for Zhang Liao or Calculus. So it can be pretty difficult to outro quickly, especially if you don't have an R5 Mercato Gauntlet. She currently needs to spend too much time on the field to fully charge all her shields in order to fully fill her concerto energy if you don't want to perform complicated animation cancelling by constantly swapping out characters, which makes her spend less time on the field. Possible fixes and improvements include the following. Increase her concerto energy regeneration. Instead of gaining 5, 18, and 23 concerto energy for all the 3 shield levels respectively, let her gain 20 concerto energy for each shield level so that casuals can outro from the field with her after the second shield charge to decrease her field time but lose access to more shield acquisition. Give her limited access to error erosion application or maximum stack count increase. Rover is currently tied to a lot of DPS units like Cortethia, Zani as a Phoebe replacement, and Phoebe for applying Spectrofrazzle. So giving Jianxin limited access to error erosion application can make her a suitable replacement for Chakona, since she's the only unit in the game that can apply error erosion. Making her able to increase error erosion stack count on an enemy can make her a suitable replacement for Error Rover in a Cortethia team composition, since she can already provide healing for survival in the Cortethia team, freeing up Rover to use with other DPS units like Phoebe and Zani, or even a solo Havoc DPS carry. Encore. Encore is generally decent and has a few disadvantages compared to other standard units that I've previously mentioned. She's often referred to as the best standard DPS, with a straightforward gameplay and decent damage output, but with that said, Encore could still use some quality of life changes or niche boosts to her kit design. Possible ideas include the following. Combine her resonance skills. Skill 1 should now be part of Skill 2, and Skill 2 or E2 gets automatically cast after Skill 1. This can make quick swapping very easy for casuals, since you can just cast her skill and then swap to another character to continue your rotations. Give her a single type damage scaling. Make her Forte circuit scale off basic attack damage instead of liberation damage. This will make it easier to prioritize basic attack damage bonus when building her and take full advantage of Soundwave's buff if you like to stay on her and use his Forte circuit after her liberation state duration ends, which can increase her personal damage when she's being played by casuals. But at the moment, it's always recommended to swap out of her Forte circuit after doing damage with her basic attacks, since it doesn't benefit from the basic attack damage amplification from Sanhua. Verina. Verina is also considered as one of the best standard characters with superior healing even compared with Showkeeper. She has one of the fastest concerto energy regeneration and decent universal buffs for diverse team building options, so she doesn't suffer badly from power creep compared to the other standard units that I've reviewed so far. So here are some minor upgrades that'll make her even more relevant in many patches to come. Give her more support utility from her liberation. At the moment, her Resonance Liberation does not offer that much value in terms of supportive utility, other than healing the on-field character. The coordinated attacks that her Liberation provides does not provide that much value for Jianxin, since she gains more Forte stacks from different attributes other than Spectral. So what I suggest is that her Liberation can apply 2 stacks of Spectrofrazzle per coordinated attack with a 1-second cooldown, just like the trigger intervals of her coordinated attacks. Hence, the maximum amount of Spectrofrazzle that she can apply will be nowhere near the maximum amount that Phoebe can apply in the confession state. This can significantly reduce Zani's dependency on Spectral Rover, since Rover can get stuck in a Cortethia team, for example. This also reduces Phoebe's dependency on Spectral Rover, since you need Spectral Rover to apply Spectrofrazzle on enemies so that Phoebe can do bigger damage. This can also potentially drive sales for future units who need Spectrofrazzle to do damage, since players who do not have Phoebe on their account will still be convinced to pull for that particular character. In summary, buffing standard units should be gradual but with caution. By giving each unit a few targeted improvement, I strongly believe that Kuro Games can revitalize these characters and potentially get compensated in revenue. This not only makes veterans happy when their old mains get buffed, but also strengthens the game's ecosystem, because fans can continue to use the characters that they genuinely enjoy playing, but not because they sit on top of the meta, ultimately benefiting both the player base and Kuro Games' long-term success. This took me quite a while to put together, so show some love by leaving a like and subscribe to help support the channel, because it's free and you can always change your mind. Be sure to also join our community Discord if you're having any issues with the game or you just want a place to chill or hang out. The link will be in the pinned comments below. Catch you guys in the next one. Bye bye.